All right.
Yes.
I suppose we'll get started then.
Are you?
So this is the Queer
Yo.
People of Color Representation in the Media panel.
Oh, shoot.
My name is Diana, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. My pronouns are... Oh, thank you.
Yes.
My pronouns are she, her. And basically, this model is about... while media coverage and on-screen portrayals of LGBT issues have improved substantially over the past few decades, rep of queer folks of color is still lagging far behind. So I guess we'll get started with introductions. Moyo, correct? Yes. Okay. Is a non-binary student currently studying philosophy and linguistics at the University of Edinburgh. In addition to studying, they are involved with the University LGBT plus Society and NUS Trans Scotland campaign. They are also a proud Christian, starting Queers of Faith, a group for LGBT plus people of faith in Edinburgh. Woo! And then next we have Antoinette.
What's up?
Antoinette is a photographer based in Nottingham. They are concerned with politics, diversity, representation of mental illness, intersectionality, and rise of social media. They want to create a world in which everyone is treated with justice and respect, and art is a place to start.
Bring it on, guys. Bring it on.
And then we have Chaune, is that correct? All right, Chaune, aka Legacy, has worked in the entertainment industry for over 6 years. Sean King burst onto the scene in 2002 and was known for his bold lyrics and heavy bass line tracks as an LGBT artist with the talent, drive, and ambition to be heard. He steamrolled a path throughout the music industry, touring across the UK, Europe, and the US, making himself a household name. Yeah. And then last but not least, we have Dimple.
Hi.
Dimple is an award-winning experimental smartphone filmmaker, serial vol entrepreneur, writer, medical journalist, psychology coach, award-winning doctor, human, TEDx speaker, London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic game maker, street doctor, and founder of the social impact movements, Urban Backer, Silence Global, and Vol Entrepreneurs.
I'm just going to leave right now.
And I'm sorry if I didn't get your pronouns. If you'd like to introduce your pronouns, you can go ahead.
They, them.
He, him, or they, them. I don't really mind either.
He, him.
And she, her.
All right,
That's
awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. So the first question is diversity enough on screen, and how does having or not having diversity behind the scenes affect content?
Who wants to take this one first?
Anyone?
Right. Can you just repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, yeah. So again, is the diversity that's on screen right now, is that enough?
No.
And how does having or not having diversity behind the scenes affect content, such as diverse writers, diverse camera crew, even all that?
So the answer to the first question is, I don't think in terms of queer people of colour, I think that there are sort of more and more mainstream channels that are featuring them, but I don't think there's enough. And I think that certainly as I have a rainbow family and a child, I think that it would be really nice, not just the coming out stories, but delving deeper. So getting married, the cultural and religious challenges, about having a baby, and even things like choosing sperm donors. I mean, there aren't that many sperm donors of colour, and that really affects a lot of things in your rainbow family. And I have a child, and he's being brought up in a rainbow family, multicultural rainbow family. So I don't think that enough mainstream TV or other programs even cover this or beginning to cover this. So I think that, yes, it's, I'm a smartphone filmmaker, and that kind of decentralizes a film industry. And the reason I came and did a smartphone film workshop is I think that we all have the ability and a powerful tool in our pocket. So we as LGBTQI people have this powerful tool. So it would be really great for more people to start using it and sharing their messages and stories, because I don't think we can rely on mainstream TV necessarily to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, it's really amazing.
Yeah, I'd just also like to add that the most visible thing about diversity on screen is obviously the actors. But there should be more people of color in making films, writing the scripts, just being behind the stage, because and writing our own stories, because I feel like at this point in time, I feel like only brown and black people can be the ones representing our stories authentically and accurately, and you can see that in Moonlight. And also The Watermelon Woman, that was the first film by a black lesbian filmmaker, but there really aren't that many films that are told. There's Pariah, but there aren't that many films that are made by black and brown people that are mainstream. And yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't know which one to choose. We'll go with this one. So again, when it comes to sort of diversity on screen, you've got the most visible aspect of diversity, which is, the, I guess you would say, ethnic makeup of your cast. And again, it really does depend on who's pulling the strings and who's actually producing the piece of media that you're consuming, because it can be so transparent when your choice in casting seems like purely tokenistic, and that just creates a whole identity crisis of, did I deserve to be here? Did they pick me because they wanted to look like they were being intersectional? Is my talent really worthwhile, or am I just sort of like a pawn in the production? And I feel like, again, with diversity, it's paramount, absolutely paramount. If you've got people that don't know or don't have the lived experience of the story you're trying to tell, obviously, the whole point of being a writer is to sort of, tell stories that, let your mind go where it wants to go and just see what you can create. But if you really want it to be grounded and authentic and be a solid piece of representation, then you need to do your research. You've got to be better. You've got to step up, and you've got to make sure that you're talking to people who've been through what you're trying to document. And, if you're not doing that level of research, be better at your job. Seriously, there are people who think that just because they implement a diversity quota, it's like, oh, it's fine. The burden of, white guilt is shoved off me now. It's like, nah, honey.
Also, just to add, there's not just one person of queer person. We all hang out together. It is unrealistic for there to be one queer person, queer person colour. No, we find each other, we hang out. Where are the shows where it's just queer and trans people of colour just hanging out, being themselves? And you can argue, there's Brown Girls, which is the web series, but there's nothing on TV, which is just queer trans people hanging out, being themselves.
Yeah, basically, like Dimple said, mainstream media, don't rely on mainstream media, make it yourself. Make it yourself.
I mean, we shouldn't have to.
Yep, of course we shouldn't have to, but if there's no space for you, you've got to make it. You've got to find it, refuse to be unheard and refuse to be unseen.
I think, sorry. Hello. As an actor myself of colour, I've been finding it difficult because it really does also come down to funding. There are people of colour who are LGBT, who are writers and filmmakers, and when they make a project, they can't get the backing for it. You know what I mean? But then someone else of Caucasian experience can write the same level of story and get backing for it, and it gets promoted and gets, put out on TV and so forth. So for me, I think that queer people of color is not getting enough representation, and when we do try to make a stand, we still get pushback because no one wants to fund us.
That's really interesting because that happened with like the Marsha P documentary on Netflix. A group of trans women tried to make a documentary about Martha P. Johnson, and a white man stole their idea and made the exact same documentary and was given funding for it. So,
yeah, I mean, can I just a point about funding? So, yeah, if you're obviously making sort of longer feature films or shorter documentaries, there's paying the actors and actresses, but actually, if you see some of the films that I've made, they're on zero budget. And if you can get a collection of people, even put out 2-3 minute videos. And the first video that I did, there was a transgender central character, and that was 2 minutes. And it's been screened in over 30 film festivals globally and won 12 international film awards. So actually you can, if you get together, even really short 2-3 minute videos can be really powerful. And the smartphones, the cameras now are getting better and better. And you really, the last films were just shot on this.
They shoot in 4K
that was it.
now.
Yeah, 4K.
They shoot in 4K.
So
you don't need to shoot in 4K.
Yeah, you don't.
They do.
Yeah, the monitors don't. We don't have 4K monitors. So yeah. So this is like high definition. You can go ahead and just do it on zero budget to start with, anyway.
Awesome.
Sorry.
No,
just to add, also just about diversity on the screen. Who are we actually representing? Where are like the people of color who are ace or aromantic? Where are the intersex people? Where are like non-binary people? Like there is quite a lot of representation for lesbian and gay and bisexual people, but the LGBT plus community is much wider than that, and there's a lot more stories that we haven't actually seen yet.
What's the next question? Because otherwise I'm going to bounce off that one.
If you'd like to bounce off of that one.
So real quick. Yeah, let's just sort of address this idea that like queer people of color, or people of color specifically, aren't often perceived as being able to be complex people. It's often like, oh, you're a brown person, or like, oh, you're black. Like, there are very like specific, narrow pathways in which characters can be developed, or like that perceived, like under the current, way that media is consumed, right? So if you're gonna have authentic, diverse representation, you got to chuck out any rule book that says you can't be, of color and this. You can't be this or that. You've got to take the rule book and just chuck it out. And I had a better point, but I forgot it. So let's move on to the next one.
All right. So what do you think about colorism in the media, even when QPOC characters are present?
Oh boy, that's a depressing one. Anyone want to take this?
No, go for it.
So, well, first of all, hi, I'm half white and half not white, and I guess, yeah, and what I sort of have realized as a result of experience is that, because I grew up in like a really white neighborhood, I got to experience some kind of level of privilege in that because people thought that racism was over, I didn't experience like cultural and economic racism in the same way that a lot of queer people of color have, which on the one hand is like, I guess that's sort of lucky in a sense, but also it means that when it comes to colorism, it comes a lot down to like color blindness and the inability to acknowledge like the actual colorism that exists. The whole like, oh, just because I don't see color doesn't mean it isn't there. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people really need to, not a lot of people, but like specifically people producing films and making art and taking photos, specifically like as a photographer, like there are so many people that will like lighten a model's skin and, change her features somewhat in Photoshop. And I'm like, the ramifications of making just subtle tweaks are so large. The message that you're sending out to like thousands of people, vulnerable people, young people, people that feel that they're being told, if you don't look in this certain way, if we didn't change these little things about you, then your story isn't worth telling and you're not worth being documented. And I think that, I guess like as a photographer, that is the thing that worries me the most. It's when photoshoppers, retouchers, and shoot producers don't take into account what they want to represent as an end product. instead of just seeing like, oh, we're including a black model, so it's fine. But like, not if you change everything about her. Like, that's a thing I have to say. Someone else do talk.
But also, oh, so I don't know how to say this, but a lot of the times when people of colour are represented, like, there aren't a lot of darker bodies. There aren't, like, it's a lot of people with, I don't want to say this, lighter skin, or if they're black, they'll have a looser curl pattern. And there isn't much representation of darker bodies because people don't want to see that. And colorism doesn't just exist in white spaces, it exists in spaces of colour too. Anti-blackness in colours of community is a real issue, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Don't really know what else to say about that, but if anyone wants to...
Well, the reason I brought it up is because when I do see a show or a film that does have QPOC characters in it, usually the main couple, it's usually a white person with a lighter skin, person of color, or two people of color of lighter skin, and I never see, two darker partners together. And that's why I just wanted to bring that up and see what you guys thought of that.
It's almost like they don't know the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. It is difficult because, for queer people of color, queer people of color being represented in the media, like you kind of only see the lighter shade of brown. And not that I don't identify, because my mother is lighter than I am, but for me, I would like to see people of darker shade being represented, because it's not that our story is different, but lighter skinned black people get treated a little bit better than darker skinned black people. I'm just saying, I can't go in depth about that, but it is, a separation even within the color community. We separate ourselves, and, it's no wonder that people on the outside even push that separation even further.
Yes?
Sorry, just really quick. So obviously we're talking about, pressure to conform and pressure to reach a standard. And I think that's something that's really important with colorism is relatability. So basically I went to America this summer. The State Department sent me on a thing with Rowan. It was really fun. And we met with an entrepreneur, and she was from Colombia. And a lot of her ideas, the reason they weren't being taken seriously is because the investors couldn't relate to her. So it would be a great product, or it would be a great idea, probably from someone of color or from a marginalized background, and the investors, who are all like cis white guys, were like, I don't get it. And so you have to think, when people are looking to consume media, if it's something that they can't relate to or they don't understand, ask why that is. And it's probably because the standard that's been set in the industry is of whiteness, cisness, attractiveness, the halo effect. People don't want to watch people, or have been conditioned to believe that people who aren't, the standard of having lighter skin or being cis, that they're not worth watching, or their stories won't be as interesting. And that's what we really have to combat with colorism, I believe. Tell me if I'm wrong. Nobody did. Great.
All right, so the next question. I personally haven't seen any non-binary POC represented at all in film, in mainstream film or television. If you have, how are they usually represented, and how do you feel about how they are being represented? And do you have any advice to folks thinking about creating content with non-binary POC characters?
Okay, I have a lot of feelings about this question. Okay, so firstly, I want to add that the idea of a gender binary is an extremely Western one. There are loads of indigenous cultures that have a third gender, whether it be the Hijra in Nigeria. In India, there's third gender identities in Nigeria. In Native American, two-spirit, but two-spirit is actually an umbrella term for any LGBT plus identity. In the Philippines, and due to colonization and white supremacy, a lot of these indigenous identities have been erased. A good example would be India, because the Hijra were an absolutely celebrated class, like a gender class in Indian culture until British colonization. And it's only recently that the British laws against the Hijra this year have been gotten rid of. And like this, the policing of our identities is completely rooted in colonization and white supremacy. Loads of people like to say, oh, well, it's really nice to live in the West because it's so LGBT friendly. The reason why the rest of the world isn't that LGBT friendly is because all of the homosexual laws, like criminalization laws, are a direct product of colonization. Mm-hmm. In Nigeria, the reason why people are literally dying is because of British laws that were passed there. And it's so ironic to me personally, as a black non-binary person, that people would not think I exist, and people think that being non-binary is something that is skinny and white and androgynous, when in fact it is not. Non-binary people exist in multitudes. We are mentally ill and fat and people of faith, and like we exist in multitudes, and we just do. We just exist. That's my thing.
All right. Well.
Oh, okay.
I don't. So, do you have any advice to people thinking about creating content with non-binary POC characters? Anyone?
Work with your actor and create the character for them, because it's going to be a lot easier than you trying to impose your experience on a character. Like literally, if you have an actor, work very closely with them, trust them, use their experience, and just make something beautiful together, because it's going to be way more authentic and way more poignant than you trying to be like, so I want my character to be really stressed out because they can't find masculine-looking jeans in Topshop. Like, no. Like, come on. Work with your actor, trust your actors, and something better will come out of it.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so coming out stories. Do different cultural narratives on coming out affect the story of yes. For example, as a Filipino American, I find it really difficult when I see a coming out story on U.S. TV. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I see the white parents are so supportive and oh my gosh, it's okay.
Okay, but I love Simon.
That was another thing I was going to bring up. But for me personally, Catholic is very rooted into our culture.
Hi.
Yeah, and so things like that. Do you think when it comes to also in Love, Simon, he's a cis upper class guy,
That's the only way we get wholesome content.
Right.
Oh, but then also the interesting thing about Love, Simon was the most visible queer person in the school was the black femme. And the black femme was treated like crap. Like, that's not lie. The black person in that film was treated like crap. And they were that black femme was taking the brunt of oppression that Simon did not have to take. Probably before he knew he was queer, people were probably trying to police his identity and his body. And it's, to be honest, the most interesting character in Love, Simon was him. I don't know his name, can't remember it right now, was him. It wasn't Simon.
All right.
Sorry, we just literally interrupted the end
You
of your
get the question, I'm so sorry.
We're great panelists. Anyone want to go first?
Any other anything about coming out?
Coming out. I'm from South America. I wasn't born in the UK, and I knew I was trans from an early age, but it wasn't a vocab that was ever pronounced in South America, so I didn't know that I could transition from female to male. And when I realized I was trans, I couldn't really tell anyone. My mother was Catholic. We were very, it's very enrooted in you about what is in the Bible and what is in the good book and what is not allowed. So I think when I moved to the States for about a year and, I moved to London, I was dragged out rather, as a lesbian at first, which was interesting because I was in an all-girls school, which was even more interesting. So I feel like from a queer person of color, the experience of coming out is so much more traumatic. I lost my family for 10 years, and it was a difficult time for me because at that time I was just starting my transition, lived as a lesbian rapper for quite some time and spoke a lot about being trans and wanting to come out again because I had to come out twice now. So I feel like young trans people of color or young LGBT people of color do find it difficult because their experience is so much harder than their other counterparts, and I think that's a hard pill to swallow even for young people today.
Yeah. And not only that, like when you do come out, you come out into majority LGBT plus space, like these spaces are majority white, and then you experience microaggressions and racism there. So it's not even like those LGBT spaces are safe. It's almost like you have to segment your identity. But also, I came out to both my parents this weekend. Hey.
This weekend.
Sorry, just like... and yeah, I was expecting very negative reactions. My dad was like, you already told me. I did not tell him. My mum was like, okay, see you on Sunday. But I'm... Obviously, coming out stories are important, but what I'm really interested is seeing how queer and trans people of colour just exist. Yeah. I want stories like that. Like, I am non-binary and I'm bisexual and I'm asexual, and I don't see any stories about me. I want to just see someone existing as me. Like, I don't even care if it's a good story. I just want to see them existing, going to uni, having a job, living their life, dating. I just want to see myself exist, and I feel like a lot of identities get that, and I want that, and I'm allowed to have that.
Can I add some? You go first.
Okay. I think, we shouldn't have to come out, really. Like you said, we should just exist. But I think in, say, the Asian community, I'm not seeing the stories where people are, coming out if they have to or want to, personally, but later in life. I know people who've had arranged marriages and they've not had the opportunity or even the space to express their sexuality early on. So what about those stories, or people who, decide, when they're much older, 60s, 70s? I don't think we're seeing those stories. And the tensions that can exist when you go back to India, how is that, if your family are ashamed, how that affects you, or, if they're trying to get you an arranged marriage. But also on the flip side, lots of Asian parents are really not, really supportive. You're not seeing those stereotypes, those images and stories that are not, like, really there.
Right. So for me personally,
Can I real quick talk about when I
oh
came
no,
out?
I'm so sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
So, like, I guess with also fellow Catholic. Hey, again. So both of my parents are from the Caribbean. Both of them immigrants in this country. And again, there's a lot of really traditional conservative views imposed by colonialism. Love the colonies; they're great. But essentially, when I came out to my mum, it literally coming out story basically was like, I got like super obsessed with religion, like born again Christian. And then I was like, the church that I was with at the time, because not all churches are homophobic, but the church I was with at the time was really homophobic. And I was like, this doesn't really feel right because I get girl crushes, right? Everyone remember girl crushes? Yeah. I was like, I get girl crushes really hard. And then I sort of realized maybe these are just normal crushes. And so I eventually left that church and I sort of accepted myself as queer. And it got to the point where I just went, my mum was at the bottom of the stairs and I was at the top of the stairs and I was like, Mum, I like girls, okay? And she's like, okay, dinner's downstairs. I was like, all right, great. And of course, later on, I would get comments from her like, don't tell anyone at church, they'll think you're a sexual predator. And then, like, another time, the kitchens are where these always happen. My dad was just like, so are you, like, a gay, are you lesbian? Like, what? And I was just sort of stood there because my dad is, like, super conservative and he's also white and cis. And I was like, I guess, yeah. He's like, I see you in photos with a lot of girls on Facebook. And I was just like, yeah. So I guess when it came to coming out, like, I could not have predicted any of those reactions. Obviously, there is some sort of element of cultural and religious stigma, particularly in the Catholic Church, because there's this idea that, like, your body is sacred and you shouldn't, like, alter it in any way because it's the way that God made you, and or you shouldn't, like, do things that are perverse. But it's also, like, sexuality isn't perverse, it's just human. But I don't know. Essentially, when it comes to coming out narratives, basically what Dimple said, like, there are so many coming out stories, and I feel like there's sort of becoming a genre of, like, this is the coming out story. It's so angsty and traumatic, and it's like, it is angsty and traumatic, but, like, don't use that to drive the plot of your film. Like, show people just existing, like you said, having jobs, going to uni, and going through the things that all people do go through, even if it's in a slightly different way.
Thank you.
That was that, sorry.
Cool. I mean, we kind of touched base on this last question already, but if you guys want to get into it more, my last question was, how does intersectionality play into identity, and what have you seen in a QPOC character in the media, and what would you like to see more of? For example, classism, disability or ability, those type of things.
Oh, sorry.
Go.
Oh my God, last week, I found a book, I can't remember what it's called, written by a biromantic asexual black woman about being a biromantic asexual black woman.
What?
And you forgot the name.
And I forgot the name. It's by Claire Dunn. Check it out. That's all I'm saying. There you go.
Mate, I've got to buy that. I want to see more mental health stuff because essentially, like, if I want to see myself reflected, like, everybody's going to want to see something different because we're all different and we all want to we want different things from the films that we watch. No one has the same experience of a film or a TV show or a piece of music or an artwork. But with queer POC characters, I'd say that one character that I really, really liked was Amoo-Peters from Sense8. I just loved seeing her and Nomi's relationship being so unapologetically just full of love and support. And I was like, this is good, wholesome content. And just, what other queer POC characters? Oh, Dot from Rebecca's series Middlemarch. My friend Rebecca, she wrote and produced and directed a web series called Middlemarch. Highly recommend. It's a great adaptation of the classic novel. And the main character is called Dot, and she develops a relationship. I'm not going to spoil it for you. But I just loved seeing her character sort of develop and not having her queerness be, like, the focal aspect of her character. But, like, it was very much a part of who she was and how her character played out. And, I guess I'd love to see more complexity and more room for growth and development, because it feels like you need to have a fully formed stock character of a queer person of color that sort of exists in your narrative. But it's like, no, let people develop, let them change, let them grow, let them find out things. I feel like there's always this pressure to be, like, the version in order to be, like, worthy of being seen. But it's like, let people grow, let them be imperfect.
Viola Davis in How to Get Away with Murder. She's a bisexual woman who is a murderer, sort of. Like, she's a lawyer, she's an alcoholic, she's a complex woman, she's a terrible person and a wonderful person. And she exists. Like, and she's queer. And it's amazing. And it's a trash show, but I love it.
I'd like to see more, I guess, rainbow family stories. And I think recently there was there's a series called Bisexual, where the main character is a queer person of colour. And They did focus on having babies and, you know, the process, but it would be nice to follow, you know, to have more complex stories and everyday stories about rainbow families as well, represented in the queer people of colour space as well.
Cool. Anything else before I turn it to the audience?
Why are you looking at me?
Because you haven't said anything.
I would like to see, you know, more queer people of color being represented, full stop. Like you said, in normal everyday life, I'm an actor, but I'm also an IT technician, and, you know, I go to work, do a 9 to 5, but, you know, I don't want, you know, when I go for any project that I'm working with, and they want that queer person of color, trans man of color, you know, I try to make sure that that is not the focus of the character. I like to make it known that, you know, the character is a trans person of color, but that's not the do-all or end-all of the person. Do you know what I mean? You know, I'm a whole person. I want the character to blossom into something far beyond just his transition or, you know, just being trans. So I would like to see more of that.
Sorry, I just remembered this film. I'm so sorry. There's a lesbian film that just came out of Kenya. It's not in English, called Rafiki.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Everyone go watch it. Go find it. Find a screening. Support this film. Please. Okay.
Cool. Does anyone in the audience have any questions?
Rafiki. Is it Rafiki?
Check your spelling bee.
I can't spell. I do linguistics, but I can't spell. Spelling's fake.
Yeah. So audience, anyone have any questions or anything? Yeah.
I'm wondering, being white myself, how to sort of, as a creator of content, how to sort of reach out to this community and represent people of color and just queer people in general in a good way, in a healthy way, without necessarily being one myself. And it's so that, you know, I don't go anywhere that's not comfortable.
What do you mean by not comfortable?
Well, I mean, I really want to make sure that I don't fall into tropes. I don't fall into something that comes from a place of misunderstanding and uninformedness.
I suppose it's trying to be more engaging with the community, but it's difficult to say that because when I do go to some conferences, there isn't enough queer people of color present in such conferences like today. I can count how many of us is in the building. So it's difficult because, you know, we want our story to be heard and told, but then we don't come to events to make ourselves represented. You know what I mean? So it's difficult for yourself and others like you to engage with the community if the community isn't coming to be a part of your, you know.
Yeah.
I would say if you know any queer people of color that are also creators and artists like yourself, just like start exchanging ideas and being like, hey, I want to make something with you. What would you like to see? And sort of work with that and just like whatever, just create the character with them. Like I feel like if you want to include them in your work or include them in your crew, make sure that they're as much a part of your creative vision as you would want yourself to be. Because it's going to be like, not cumulative, what's the word? Collaborative. It's got to be a collaborative effort. And it will enrich your work. And if you can do that in like just a way that's like respectful and just not being a dick, which I assume like most people in this room aren't. There's probably one or two of you, but that's fine. But yeah, just make the effort just to reach out and just say, hi, I want to work with you. I don't want to just see like your skin color. I don't want to see your sexuality. I want to work with you and know what your experience is worth. And that will give you a better story.
Yeah, I think, totally agree. I think that that's why today's panel event is really, really important as well. So events like this, ClexaCon, and organisations like Gay Women's Network Multicultural provide spaces so that queer people of colour can actually come and express their points of view. So there's also a movement called the Human Library Movement, and that's all about diversity, where please look it up. So I'm a human book as part of the Human Library Movement. So that's an opportunity to go and read real human beings and their stories. So the advice is seek people out, and conventions like this with these kind of panel events are really important so that you can hear our stories and really get our points of view as well.
And sorry, just one last thing. If you don't genuinely like the work that a queer person of color is doing, if it doesn't resonate with you, don't bother. It's much better to find the work of someone who happens to be a queer person of color, but if their work really speaks to you, go all out, make all the effort, it'll be worth it.
Just to bounce off that with a comment myself, is to always, I always say this to white creators as well, which is not all people of colour are the same. We all come from different backgrounds, we all have different skin colours, different cultures, different perceptions on the world. So when you want to write a story about queer people of colour, you have to make sure that you can really pick and decide who is it. It's not just, I want a person of colour. It's going to be from what kind of background and how will that affect the story while not being completely who they are. It's something that I get really annoyed with in media, is they're just we have this person of colour, ambiguous, and it's all the same. But we all come from such, it's like with white people, we all have such collective cultures and backgrounds and lots of different ways of perceiving the world, or how the world perceives us. So it's something that's really important to take into account when you're writing our stories, is to understand that it's just as complex, if not more so, because there is such a different intersectionality of it all, and how it all has a relationship with each other. I just think it's something that's really important to take into account when you're writing the stories.
Also, just a little thing. What's that? Is it dias? Can't remember how to say the word.
Diaspora.
Thank you, babe. Diaspora. So where are the people from? For example, I've never been to Nigeria, but I'm a Nigerian person. My experience as a Nigerian person who's never been to Nigeria is very different from someone who was born in Nigeria, maybe moved here when they were 6, and now live here. And we're both Nigerian. Even within that, there's...
Yeah, same with me. I'm Belizean, but I've never lived there. But every single member of my family lives there. But it's been such a formative part of my culture and my upbringing. It's just who I am. But at the same time, they are very different experiences, completely different. But we both experience the same culture.
Yeah, I think a lot of us probably have composite identities. And maybe part of rainbow families. So there's a lot of such a spectrum. So I think it's about individual stories, and just note that, okay, it's just one facet of our story.
Yes.
Question about rainbow families, because I rarely hear about it. So would you feel comfortable telling what you mean by rainbow family? Because I think it differs from person to person.
Sure. So I'm talking about queer people of colour, LGBTQ people having children. And so, I have a son, and I don't think there are that many stories out there in the media. So there are a lot of people now going through assisted fertility and having children. And so that's, that's kind of, what I was talking about.
Sorry, the only example I can think of off the top of my head is the Fosters. Because it's the only one. Yeah,
the only one.
Yeah, it's the only one.
The only one.
Any other questions?
How do you think that we can get more backing, essentially, from queer people of colour and people in LGBT to attend things and to show the support that we need to then get the word spread a lot more and to get the message across It's like, for example, today, I'm seeing like a limited amount of queer people. How do we get the support there to then encourage each other to then show that as well?
It would have been really sick if there was like just a space for queer people of colour. Like, more people of colour would have come if they knew they would just have a space for themselves.
Yeah, but you've also got to understand that people, basically, there are queer people of colour spaces that exist and they feel safe and they feel good, but you've got to be willing to invite people in, because if you're not willing to go out of your comfort zone, you've got to be willing to let people in. And I think that's probably the scariest thing, and that's probably why queer people of colour, like, might not show up to events like this if you feel like you're going to be outnumbered or not listened to. Whereas if you like have a select run event or like a queer people of colour event and you invite allies to come along, be like, hi, this is our event, this is the thing that we're doing, and we really would love it if you came and just like shared it with us. It's about sharing things, and I feel like that is a really tricky thing to balance, because you've got to be mindful that people might not be respectful of you. Like, letting people into a like safe space you've made for yourself is so hard. But I feel like you've got to be sort of brave and take that step of inviting a few people in.
Having a little debate here. But
yes,
also,
there's a debate.
But then also this is just my general feeling about it. Like, well, I want to be like queer in a space and not have to deal with like microaggressive comments or racism. Like, I don't want to deal with that, so I'm going to avoid certain spaces. And I don't think it's on me to like go to a space and be treated badly. I think it's on people in position of privilege. Like, the internet exists. Read up on our experiences. Read up on microaggressive stuff. Watch YouTube videos. Look at some journal articles that are free and available. Like, if you're part of a uni institution, like, take advantage of the fact that you have free journals. Little things like that. Like, we educated ourselves too. Like, I didn't wake up being woke. I was mad problematic. I was like,
dude, 2012 was a rough time for all of us, man.
like, I was mad problematic. I was all like, ooh, the LGBT people, like, I agree with them, but it's against God. And now I run like a group for queer people of faith. Like, it's all about like taking responsibility for your own education. No one's going to do it for you.
I think it's also just little steps, really. I think there's no one answer. I mean, I think conventions like this are good. And I mean, I met Chaune at the screening of my film at the Fest, and then I just connected with him and then told him about this and invited him along. So I think it's just slowly, you know, we've all met today, and little steps. And conventions like this are really important, and panels like this are really important. And the good thing, because we've got YouTube and social media, I mean, some of it's like not so good, but you can also see the content, hear the stories of queer people of colour, and just reach out, you know, to them. And there may be connections. A lot of my films and collaborations, I've just reached out to people, something they've said or a video, and it's amazing if you reach out with this amazing, authentic intention, how people will be, you know, willing to share things and collaborate with you. So it's just being honest with that intention and just reaching out to people. Baby steps.
Yeah. It's also about, you know, breaking that segregation that we have within our LGBT community, period. You know, when I was coming up, I'm old. I don't look very, I'm old. When I was coming up, there was very big segregation between the queer people of color and, you know, the whiter, lighter version of us. And I feel that has continued to spill over, but now young people are pushing boundaries. You know, young people are using, you know, social media, which I'm not very good at, by the way, using social media to connect with everyone and get their stories out there. And I think, like, you know, quite a lot of people didn't know this event was going on today or this weekend period, didn't even know what this event was. I didn't know about it until Dimples told me, you know, and I feel like, you know, for the queer people, the queer community, we should know about these type of events so that we can, you know, get the choice to be invited and, you know, and be a part of it, so that we can be inclusive.
I mean, Yes, but also like I'm pretty sure if anyone turns on Grindr in this, like they're gonna see stuff like no blacks, no Asians, stuff
no
like
trans.
no trans, stuff like that. Like the racism in the LGBT community is real. Like
It's rife.
it's rife. Yeah, yeah.
You've had your hand up for ages.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to give an example of the queer people of color spaces where they invite white allies. Yeah, it's in come from Denmark. So we have Copenhagen Pride, which is dominated by gay cis men, right? White gay cis men. I will add that. So a group of KPDOC from this alternative pride, which is like the Nørrebro parade, it was called. And Nørrebro is an area who is dominated mostly by non-white people. And the official pride avoided that area because of the racism, unfortunately. But the really cool thing about that was that they engaged the whole area, and they were all super supportive. And then they said on the website of the event description that, okay, if you're a white person, you should go behind in the parade, so that queer people of color go first. So I think that's really great. So like in a very
Yo, that sounds sick. Why can we do that at our Pride instead of TERFs?
I mean,
like Black Pride exists.
we
Black
had
Pride
UK Black
is
Pride.
real. Yeah,
we have UK Black Pride.
Lady
Phil.
Check her out. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's one of the mentors of mine, along with Campbell X, who also does filmmaking. Black Pride is an event that, you know, it used to be clashing with Main Pride, but now we do it the day after Main Pride, so it's on the Pride weekend. So, you know, but what I found is that allies feel like they can't come to Black Pride. You know, they feel, oh yeah, this is just for black people. It's Black Pride. We can't go there. You know, whereas it's very inclusive, and you know, it should be just like how Main Pride is. You know, supposed to be inclusive. A lot of people the black LGBT community segregate themselves and save themselves for Black Pride because they feel like Black Pride is, you know, is where they can be themselves. You know, and that still promotes a lot of segregation in the community. And I feel that, you know, there should be some sort of combination between to bridge the gap.
Sorry, sorry to like push my agenda. I don't want anyone to leave this room without remembering that like white supremacy is real. It controls black and brown bodies. It hypersexualizes us. It desexualizes us. This is for asexual people, aromantic people. This is trans people. That like trans women of color are the most vulnerable in our community. That like being visibly queer and a person of color is dangerous, still very dangerous. That you can experience violence from people inside of our community. And I'm not trying to like put this on people. This is just something that we all have to take in mind and keep just take in mind and just think about and to research and be like, how are my actions, or in the little spaces that I am in, what can I do? Like, what are the expectations I have of people of color, and are they unrealistic? Am I over-sexualizing or desexualizing certain individuals because of their race? And it's just something that I think that we need to think about, and that's all.
All right, thanks for coming out, everyone. That is our time. I'm really happy that you shared your experiences, and I learned so much.
Thank you for having us.
So
Thank you for
everyone.
being in this room, literally.
Peace out.
Thank you.